Well, welcome everybody from break. Maybe you had lunch if you're on the East Coast, or maybe you had a snack if you're in the West Coast. But welcome back. So this is a combined workshop of cultural responsive approaches to abusive partner intervention and engaging refugees and new Americans, which is a complementary presentation, of course. And I'll briefly introduce myself and then pass it on to my co-presenter, Nyaz. My name is Juan Carlos Arean. Some of you saw me in the opening panel. I work with Futures Without Violence, which is a national organization. And I have been doing this work for a little over 30 years. And I'll pass it on to Nyaz for introduction.
Hi everyone, my name is Nyaz Kirkuki. I'm with Tapestri. We are here in Atlanta, Georgia. We're doing I'm doing intervention and prevention, working with refugee and immigrant population here.
Okay, thank you so much. So let's get us started. So I like to start with a question for you all, and you can use the chat for this rather than the question and answer. That'll be an easier thing for us to track. Some of you might have been in the opening panel where we talked about intersectionality, and this is a little bit of a continuation to that, but I like to hear from your perspective. I think this is a question that I posed to the panelists, but from your perspective, what are some of the barriers to cultural responsivity in abusive partner intervention programs? Please write in the chat for now. What are some of the barriers? Language barriers. Thank you, Devin. Not knowing other people's cultures. Okay, thank you. Gregory. Approaching a situation from your own perspective, not considering their culture and practices, wanting to correct harmful beliefs without invalidating their cultural experience and traditions. Excellent, Diana, thank you. Lisa Nitch, focus on cultural competence versus humility. Yeah, you're getting ahead of yourself here with my presentation. No, just kidding, Lisa. Lack of materials. Okay, fabulous. Trainings, Amanda, thank you. In New York City, we only have English and Spanish, which for New York City, of course, city with pretty much all the languages in the world. Responsivity is one of the most understudied aspects of APIP. Recruiting facilitators who reflect the communities they serve, getting support from the criminal legal system and cultural specific services. Audra, hello. Power structures within the agency. Oops, I lost my place here. Upholding mainstream norms, language, and input. Jack, finding meaning together. Thank you. So many wonderful friends here. Carolyn, defining language. Definitely language. Thank you. Recognizing our own implicit and I would say explicit bias. Yeah, thank you. Lack of empathy. Wow, great. Having cultural specific and appropriate leaders, facilitators in these groups. Lack of resources. And thank you for mentioning leaders and not only facilitators. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Questions for more information, respond accordingly. Feeling paralyzed by the diversity of cultures. That's a good one. Not having staff that represents the cultures, being able to provide services in the client's language. So language is a lot. In-person AP groups instead of virtual. Okay, providers familiar with the culture of those they serve, finding Spanish-speaking women to co-facilitate. Interesting. Culturally competent facilitators and lack of sustained operational funds. Yeah, this costs money and can be a problem. And not recognizing the culture of the person. So a lot about language barriers, a lot about not understanding the cultural of the person, cultural competence and humility. And so we'll talk about all of this. Thank you so much for your responses. And sorry if I didn't get to your particular one. Let me start by talking a little bit about what do we mean by cultural responsivity? You know, all of a sudden it's like, okay, what is this? Is this like the new thing? No. These are variations where our thinking is always evolving, right, with these things. At the core, in a very basic way, is meeting the needs of the diverse populations in your community. So that's a lot of the things that you were talking about: language needs, cultural needs, and there could be others too. So at the very basic level, we hope that offering interpretation services for participants with limited English proficiency or deaf and hard of hearing participants. I know this is a money issue, as someone mentioned there. We recognize that. And there are grants out there that are specific for this issue, or even this could be a topic that a private donor would be interested in funding, because it's very particular. It doesn't have to be a grant for domestic violence. So definitely it's a matter of expanding our horizon on how to look for that. But, and by the way, if you receive federal funding, you actually are obliged to offer these interpretation services. They are not optional. So please pay attention to that. If even if your program doesn't receive this funding, but your agency receives this funding, you are obliged to provide the services. But I hope that we all want to do it because we want to meet the needs of the populations. Certainly translating the materials, and someone mentioned the not having materials available, not only to Spanish, but the most representative languages in the community. Again, discuss money. Again, money can be found. Lisa Nitch can tell you all about that. Offering options for participants with low literacy levels. This is an important one. It's not only about people who have limited English proficiency. Sometimes access is about people that don't know how to read or write and that might not want to tell you because of shame about it. So finding options, and you can be creative with this one. You can be creative with the language one. I think our friend James Henderson sometimes pairs people up in exercises and stuff. Some people that have higher literacy with people have lower literacy. Some people make recordings of the handouts, for instance. And with today's technology, there's so many possibilities. It's not a hard thing to do. And you can also pair up people that speak certain languages. I think Nyaz will talk about, he works with a very diverse group of New Americans and refugees. So again, it's easy to say my agency doesn't have money for this, but I think there are creative ways to do this if we are really committed to that. I think you folks mentioned this, having facilitators who reflect the diversity and intersectionality, going back to that, of participants. It's not only about race and ethnicity, right? It's about sexual orientation, gender identity, ability, and so on. And I know that you cannot represent everything, but certainly some of those aspects should be represented with the facilitators. And like how we say in the first panel, it's just not enough to put your request for, how do you say, when you're trying to hire someone, I love the word there, on Indeed or like that. You have to do it through relationships. That's how you will find people, through relationships, through community work, through knowing people, and so on. That's the best way to do it. And then I think someone or a couple of you mentioned practicing cultural humility. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with that term. It's a term that came as alternative to cultural competence, because cultural competence, first of all, it seemed like it's something that you could study and then be competent all of a sudden, and like you're an expert in this, which is not. It's a journey, right? It's a process, but also it lacks a certain aspect of it. And the word actually humility, I think it conveys a very different feeling and energy than competence. And one of the definitions of that is that it involves an ongoing process. So that's where it's ongoing, it never ends, of self-exploration and self-critique. If you were in Jojo Path's workshop, you heard about that, combined with a willingness to learn from others. It means entering a relationship with another person or group of people with the intention of honoring their beliefs, customs, and values. I think that's so powerful to think of honoring them, because I think I'll talk about this in another slide. So often, especially in the domestic violence field, we think of culture as an obstacle, as a problem. It's, oh my gosh, what are we going to do about these people from different cultures? This is about honoring that. And as you will see later, using it as an asset, actually, not just thinking of it as an obstacle, which it can be, of course, right? Now, we want to go deeper into cultural responsivity. And I mentioned that the other word, like the basic practices, is really about centering culture, putting it at the center as a critical component of meaningful intervention. And this is where it gets even more challenging. And again, I think there are few programs, some represented here, that do this really well, centering culture. And what does that mean? Sometimes offering culturally specific groups that might include, for instance, Men Stopping Violence used to have the option, the majority of their participants, I believe, were African American from Atlanta. They were in Decatur. And they offer the option of being in a mixed group, like a culturally mixed group, or in exclusively an African American group. And that made a difference for some people. And of course, Spanish speaking, but it could be also a group for LGBTQ, again, culturally defined, or people of a certain religious affiliation, if you have enough people, right? There's also always the question of that. Many times you will not. The other thing is adapting curricula and other materials. So in the previous slide, we said translating. Now we're saying adapting. That's more than translating. That's really trying to understand culturally how this will resonate with people and how does it translate culturally. I've seen, unfortunately, examples even of very well-known curricula that were literal translations of the curriculum in English, and I have seen that not working. So that's a real challenge. Reflecting the diversity and intersectionality of participants, not only with facilitators, which is what we see a lot, but at every level of the organization. Some of you mentioned that, including the governance, including the board of directors, because that will change the conversation. Genuine collaborations between system and community-based actors. What does that mean? That when we have a coordinated community response, we bring the community into that. It's not only about law enforcement. It's about inviting people to the table and sometimes trying to find money to pay them to come to the table so that we can hear from them. In the first panel, there were questions about how do you involve cultural diverse people in your work. And it's a lot about relationships. It's a relationship kind of thing, spending time, inviting people, offering food, and so on, right? Offering meaningful referrals or wraparound services. Lisa Nitsch from House of Ruth is here. They offer wraparound services, fatherhood services, employment services, and not only the typical referrals of mental health and substance abuse, but really going back to that one of the principles of this project, which is about the needs of people beyond just stopping the violence. There's other needs that people have. It could be medical needs, it could be dental needs, it could be other things. So sometimes those are relatively easy connections or referrals that we can make that can really change the dynamics within the group. But this is universal, not only for a cultural approach, right? And practicing cultural solidarity. So what is cultural solidarity? Well, I actually, even before I knew about cultural humility, about 20 years ago, offered a critique of cultural competence and offered a definition that is in some ways similar to cultural humility. But I wrote that it was the ability to effectively operate in different cultural contexts, so that fluidity, through the comprehension of the unique experiences of members from a different culture, so that's very similar, through awareness of one's own culture. So we need to know our own culture first, and that sometimes can be challenging for mainstream folks. Empathic understanding of oppression, and critical assessment of one's own privilege. So I would like to move on to some scenarios. These are specific about facilitation, but I thought that this would be a way to get you folks involved. I'm going to read the question and then I'm going to put a poll there that you can answer. Scenario number one. And by the way, please, if you have questions, you can write them in the chat and we'll get to them hopefully at some point. So here's a scenario. You're a facilitator, and one of the participants refers to his partner, the female partner, as my girl. Do you, number one, challenge the comment as sexist? Number two, ignore the comment? Or number three, consider the cultural context before responding? And I'm going to put a poll there. Oh, I guess the poll was already up. I didn't realize that. So I'll take a few more seconds or. Okay. I'll end the poll now. And here should be the results. Hopefully you can all see them. So that's interesting. The majority of you said consider the cultural context before responding. Very few said ignore the comment. And again, it depends as a facilitator, it depends on the flow of the group and what's happening, right? Sometimes you will choose your battles, if you will. And 16% challenge the comment as sexist. I use this example because I was trained, and this was a long time ago, but I was trained with this scenario, and what we were told at the time, it was definitely to challenge it as sexist. I have to say this training was very mainstream, very wide. And once I had already been practicing. And if you don't take the cultural context, so in some culture, this is not an offensive thing, and it's not necessarily a sexist thing, right? It depends on where you're coming from. So I do think 3 is very important. Sometimes you will have to challenge it as sexist, and sometimes you will just understand that that's okay, a way in which people speak. And again, if you are a mainstream, say a white facilitator, and you're challenging, say, African American or Black man on this comment, boy, it could get really complicated. At the very least, you will lose them completely. You know, at worst, I don't know, it could be some kind of confrontation. Great. Scenario number 2, you are facilitating an exercise about sexism and male oppression of women, which hopefully all of your curricula have. A male participant of color says, you want to hear about oppression? I've tons of stories about the racism I have experienced. Do you, 1, tell him, this is not the topic we're covering here? Number 2, ignore his comment. Or number 3, ask him to share some of the stories. So I'll put up the poll. Okay. Interesting. That's changing. Okay, I'll end it now and share the results. So this one is interesting. 70% asking to share some of his stories. 29%, this is not the topic we're covering, and only 1% ignore the comment. This would be a hard one to ignore, I think. Again, it depends on the context. And again, when I was trained in number 1, or I was told, yes, when that comes up, you should basically redirect the conversation. Now, again, it all depends on the context. Are you then saying, we'll come back to this? Or are you saying, we will never talk about your own experience? And I was trained to say, we'll never talk about experience. Or not to say, but basically never to come back. The famous parking lot that we sometimes put in trainings, right? And never come back. And let me tell you, it is problematic. This is about, going back to the first panel, if you were there, it's all about intersectionality, or I think Calais was the one that said, some people call it the oppression Olympics. Is sexism more important than racism or than other kinds of oppression? I think you can go that way, but I think you will lose people, right? You will not be able to continue work. You will not have credibility, basically, with folks. And very quickly, let me tell you a story that white facilitator in a community of color, actually, she had all people of color in her group, and she was telling me that right after the George Floyd and other murders, Breonna Taylor and so on. I think this was right after George Floyd, like the first meeting they had after George Floyd. And she didn't know what to do. And one of the participants said, what about if we go around the table and we all talk about police brutality, basically, in our own lives? How had all men of color? And she was like, oh my God, how is this going to go? But she decided to go with it. And they spent the whole session talking about that. And it was powerful, it was hard, but let me tell you, that changed the whole dynamic of the group from there on. It really changed it because for the first time, it was a real conversation about some of these issues. So again, if your curriculum doesn't have the room for this kind of conversation, I think it would be difficult to do this cross-cultural work. One more poll here. And I'm sorry, but I'm not tracking the chat, Brittany and Nyaz. If you see something interesting, maybe you can let me know, or I'll do when I cannot present and look at the chat at the same time. So you're introducing the wheel of equality, right, from Duluth to the group. Some participants of color tell you that men and women can never be equal because we are not the same, and that this is a white concept. Do you, one, try to convince them that equality is the goal of the intervention? Two, ignore the comments? Or three, reframe the exercise so it is more culturally relevant? So the last poll. There you go. I see that some people have been answering the poll in the chat. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. I will end it in a few seconds. Okay, so here are the results. This is interesting. I hope that people are being honest with this about how you would do it. I appreciate it. 80% or 81% reframe the exercise so that it's more culturally relevant. So interesting. About 17% trying to convince them that equality is the goal, and 2% ignore the comments. Hopefully it's not the same people that are ignoring all the comments, but it's different people. So this is an interesting one, right? And I don't think there's a perfect answer here. I think definitely equality should be one of the goals of the intervention. I don't know, depending on the group, I don't know if I would be out there saying it if people are fighting it, right? And I have been working for 30 years with all kinds of communities, and sometimes the will of equality can be challenging for people. So reframing the exercise, sometimes what I have done is, okay, if you have a program with equality, what would you put at the center? What is the opposite of the will of power and control? And then people will come up with things like respect, understanding. It's not to invalidate equality. It's like a process of getting there with their own values, because I think that's an important way to work cross-culturally, to work with people's values. And then you can hold them accountable with what they are doing. What is important for you on communication, understanding, respect, love, then how are you walking that walk, if you will? So thank you. Thank you for doing this with me. I have a couple of slides here, and I have covered most of it, and then I'll pass it to Nyaz because he has such a wealth of knowledge in working cross-culturally. Again, I talked about seeing culture as an obstacle, and people use it as a justification. That is a reality. But it could also be a source of motivation and inspiration and change, and there are always counter stories, right? I grew up in Mexico, and I have had people saying, When I did an intake, yeah, I hit my wife, all Mexicans, and said, buddy, I'm from Mexico. That's just not true. And then, people always can come up with examples of counter stories, of different stories, right? And it's important to point out that every culture has values and people that endorse domestic violence and that oppose it, or gender-based violence in general. And these values might look different. Just going back to the previous exercise, it might not be that equality is how it's verbalized, but you can get there through a different set of values, if you will. The concept of cultural accountability is a big word that we have, and it's not only about people who we work with, right? We have to be culturally accountable to them, to their families, and to their communities. So you can see some examples here what this means. It's about partnering with cultural specific organizations and compensating them to incorporate their cultural values and teachings into the curricula, providing cultural specific programming, some of the things that we talked about there, participating in CCR, task forces, having them observe group sessions and provide feedback. We do that hopefully with advocates, right? Why not with cultural specific organizations so that they can tell us, this could probably work better this way. Certainly provide cross-training, develop community accountability processes outside of formal systems, and develop collaborative wraparound support, going back to the concept of wraparound. And I know I'm going fast through these slides, but hopefully you can think of, and by the way, some of the assessments that we have developed with CJI, maybe someone can put the link to where people can find the assessments, includes not only this, but this deeper practices of racial justice. You might remember that this is one of our principles. So it's not about just generally culture, but I think it's very important to think about racial justice, incorporating it in every level in our values, revising your policies. Who are these policies benefiting? And who are these policies hurting, right? From a racial point of view. Training of staff, very few people do that, right? Using an expanded ACEs tool that includes things like poverty and racism and so on. Expanding your assessments to include, expanding them beyond the systemic, like criminal record and child welfare. And again, if you really have a racial lens through this, you will understand that, of course, those assessments don't tell the whole story, right? Some people get involved in systems disproportionately than others. And, you can even host community and system dialogues about racial justice. So again, I think I went fast through all of this. There's a wealth of information in our clearinghouse where you can go deeper on these things, or you can always contact me. I can put this in the chat, but I do want to pass it on to Nyaz because he has a really wonderful presentation that he's going to share with us. You're muted.
Thank you, Carlos. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had a good lunch and you are not sleeping. We have beautiful weather here in Atlanta. I am jealous not to be outside, but I hope I will enjoy time with you guys. Before I start, I want to tell you a little bit about Tapestri, who we are, what kind of service we provide, to give everyone a sense of what we do here. And we are one of few organizations. Mainly, we work with refugee and immigrant population in the U.S., specifically here in Atlanta. Can we go next? Okay, our mission, Tapestri, is dedicated to end violence and oppression in the refugee and immigrant community here in Atlanta. Next. And this is the client language we serve in last year, 2023. So as you can see, some of the languages is Arabic, Bosnian, Burmese, Dari, English, Farsi, French, Chechen, Hindi, Nepali, Portuguese, Spanish, Swahili, Tigrinya, Urdu, and there's, I think, a few others I missed to put it in. Thank you. So I want to just tell you a little bit about what is the difference between refugee and asylum. There is some confusion sometimes in the media when they mix everything. So this is the definition. If you want, I can read it to you. But this is what is refugee mean and what's the asylum mean. When they come to US, refugee basically is like they come to the US department, so they will be in the third country. They will apply for through UNHCR and they will get status and they will come to United States and they will resettle in the state. With the asylum is more, they come in because there is a fear of persecution in their country because of religion, ethnicity, race, social group, political group. So they will come and they will come to United States. Next. So the main street when we hear is we hear immigrant. And when it comes to the immigrant, the first thing we hear and the first thing it comes to our mind is undocumented. So those people that are here, they don't have any status and they come here. And that's not the majority. This is the least people that are here, they are undocumented. Mostly, as you can see, they are here, they come through green card, they have a status in their country, or they will already apply for it through a temporary work permission or a visa as a student or a spouse, they get married or diplomatic, or they come as a business. So the last piece is when they come is they're undocumented. They come to the United States, they're undocumented, or sometimes they're documented, but their documentation is expired. And that's when they will not be able to reapply or they will not have a status. Next. So our program, so we have 4 programs: domestic violence, human trafficking, men's program, and so we work with the children as well. Next. So when we say we work with children is mainly when they come here. So either they have a family member here or they don't have. So we work with them through their process from the day they are here. So we help them with counseling, case management, financial aid, education, enroll them in school, or if they don't speak language, they're a little bit older, they will put them in ESL class and the school will start, or they're here, or they have different other legal assistance. We refer them in partnership with other organizations. We will help them with their legal status, and we help them also with the transportation, and we engage them with the community as well. Next. So for the human trafficking victim, this is also the service we provide, is the case management, interpretation, and translation. Housing. We do partnership also with the counseling. We do drug and alcohol treatment, education as we speak, and we do transportation, and we do life skill training as well. And people sometimes they hear they don't have any skill, they came out or they've been working the farm, for example, for 10 years, 15 years, and we will help them to learn some skills beside that so they can go back to the community and they can contribute. And we help them with the employment assistance and also with the immigration and policies.
Yeah, there's a question of whether Tapestri serves clients nationwide.
No, we don't. We are local. We only here in Atlanta.
Thank you.
So domestic violence, same thing. We work with the survivor, counseling, legal support, immigration service, short-term and long-term housing, and also assisting with the public benefit, apply for public benefit, and supporting. We have a support group as well, and we work with job assistance, ESL classes, training, and also help them to go back to the community, or sometimes they don't want to be in the community. We transfer them to a community, to a places they will not be engaged because they're fear of the community will get engaged. Next, please. Men's program. So we have domestic violence intervention program, we call it here FF. We have engaging men and boy program. So we have prevention and we have intervention. So with the intervention program here, we work with the men and also we work with the boys. We do a lot of partnership with school, with different communities, with churches, with mosques, with leaders in the community to help to build that relationship with them and also to engage them as well. We learn a lot from them when we are in the community because we ask for their need, not just for the adult and also for the youth, what's their need. And sometimes they are very new here, they're 6 months, 1 year, and we ask them what's their basic need, what topic usually it will be benefit them rather than to just go and do our presentation or do our focus group with them. So we can address what their need at that time and we can go moving forward. Next. Family Violence Intervention Program is a course mandate, is a course here in Atlanta, is a 24-week classes. In this 24-week classes, we provide interpreter, and there is people they ask about, I think maybe about grant. We are lucky, we have a THS grant of human service, is very limited, but it will cover the interpreter. So if when we have a man they don't speak the language, we provide them the interpreter. Okay, so I think before I go to this question, I want to also add a few more things about interpretation. I think it comes to the questions. Alice, you mentioned a few things. We do provide interpreter, but we train those interpreters. So we have 2 training during the year. So they will come to those training, and I do also one-on-one. I work with them. I do train them as well for that specifically working with the domestic violence intervention program. We don't use family member when it comes to the interpretation, even if we don't have fun. Sometimes it will run out, but our practice is to bring, and most of those men, they are literacy, they don't read or write in their language. When I get a call from the probation officer, and he asks, I have a man, but oh my God, they don't speak English. They do not just speak English, they cannot read or write in their language. I say, bingo, I like it. So that's how we're gonna work with. So my philosophy is, because he doesn't speak language, I will ask him to ask one person from his community to work with him. In that period of the 6 months he's working with them, so I'm educating another man from his community. He's not just teaching him and to learn the skill, that person also learn the skill for himself while this month, because we're having a lot of homework, so they have to prepare during the week. Someone has to go through the curriculum and pick up the piece and learn it and have a discussion with it and teach them what that means and explain it to them. And when he come back, he will be fully engaged in the class, but that person also, he will be learning something from it. And also we have a community project with that. I asked 2 men from his community to be in the class when we have a project, and they have to present, and the the idea is behind it. When they finish the class, it will be 2-3 men in this community. It will be supportive. He can reach out to them, he can ask them about what's their need, if he needs a discussion or he's in a time he needs to take off. There is a man in his community, he can reach out to them. So those men, they come to the class, they are already angry, they didn't understand the process, they're in the court, sometimes they do explain it to them, sometimes they don't have any idea. So by the time they are in my class to do the intake, they're already full from everything. They don't want to even talk to me sometimes because in like almost 3 months, 4 months, they didn't see their child. And also some of them, it affect their status, their immigration status. So they may be able to be deported. So I have to deal with them at that time. And some of them, they're unemployed, they don't have work, they don't have housing, they are sleeping on the couch. This is my role. It comes as an FF provider, what I will do. When I did my internship with Men Stopping Violence, I got one tip. Say you have to listen to the women, but you have to listen to the men as well and help them and listen to them so you can go through your journey. So when we talk about culture, like why it's important to incorporate culture in the effect. So the culture, usually when they come to the class, I will tell them, I am not here to change your culture. I am not here to be in a place to tell you what to do. We are here to value what you're bringing and what inspiration you're bringing to the class. And learning from them and learning from their culture is I have to do a lot of studying. I have to learn about where they are coming from. If they've been in a situation they never been in the classes before, I have to learn about their background, about their history, about the colonization it happened in their country, how that affects them, how it affects in their life, and also understand the language and understanding what it means a to have a different dialogue in one country, and from that dialogue they have different groups. Those different groups they're speaking different languages. So to understand all the culture and the language and the dialogue, and also the tone of the voice, the way they sit down, the way they talk, the way they present in the class, the way they're not loud, they're mild. We have to understand all this when we are presenting, when we are there in the, and also to understand what's their holiday, why it's important for them. I had a man who was Muslim. He was the sunset prayer is very short, so it was happening at the time he need to pray. So you have to understand for him to give him that opportunity to pray, to allow them an understanding why he cannot hold that prayer because they have a short period of the time when it's sunset, he needs to do that prayer. So to understand all this is very important to so the men can be open to you. So they will feel they're part of this group, so they will be honest and they will be open. I will share a few examples about the class, and maybe it will be a reflection for you. Maybe you have a thought about it. Maybe you put it in the chat. That's fine. I had a man come to my class. Usually, and this is before COVID, we are virtual right now. And I go to the class, I will be in the class 30 minutes, and we are renting this place. So it's a one room, this is not our office. We are renting one room, there is one restaurant in it. And it's a big room. It was a big room, but it's one room. So I was there 30 minutes. I saw a man, this is his first week, with his partner and the children in front of the office. It's raining, it's winter. The interpreter was not there yet. So I told the interpreter, I told him, does he know he cannot bring his partner and his child? I say, yes, we did explain it, but he's here. They don't have a car. They use the transportation. It will take them an hour. So the man, by the time they take him and come back, our class is 2 hours, so we'll be done. So I told him, what we gonna do? So if it's you, what you will do to send them home, put them absent, and you will be arguing with the partner until they go home and blame the partner because for any reason, I don't know what there. So what I did, I say, by the time the interpreter was there, and they stay in my car because they will not be allowed to be in the room. Is that okay with them? So they agree. So I put the child and the mother in the car until they finished the class and they went back. So it's very easy for us to tell them go back and come back next week and put them absent, but is there a solution for us as a facilitator to go out of the box and think if there's a solution for that? I had another scenario. I had the interpreter and the man was not speaking like the first week, second week, and this is beginning of my work. I asked the interpreter, why this guy, he looks so mad, he's not opening, he's not sharing anything. So when I did some digging, I find out this guy, he's from different group. So they don't go along to each other. This is back, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago. They had a problem because from different tribe and they have a different group opinion about it. So he will not open to it. So I have to change the interpreter. So for this man to be open, so he can participate. So those are sometimes it comes to you when you are not even thinking about it, why this man is not open. I have another scenario. It was two men. They just came to the class, and I had a white man in my class. And while we are in the class, these two men, it was their second week, and the white man, he was there for 12 weeks. And he told me, these two people, this is exactly what I say, these two people, they are recording my voice, and I don't want them to be in the class. You have to let them go. So I said, can we talk about this one? And he agreed with. And I find out this white guy, he was their supervisor. So I don't know how that happened, but both of them, they was in my class, and both of them, they was working in the company, and that white guy, he was their supervisor. So he was scared of recording, but in the end of the class, they're not recording. They're just using their translation phone to check those some words they don't understand. And that's why they are here. So to be in a position to have this kind of argument and how to deal with it and how to put you in a position, you have to let these two guys to go because I've been here longer and I don't comfortable for them to be here. One more, and that was also, it was a little bit shocking for me, but I had some background about it. So a gentleman came to the class and the class was all full and he was standing and he was not sitting. And I asked one of the interpreter if he can move one chair to the other side. So this gentleman sit down and the interpreter didn't understand. Say, I will be closer to my client if I am here. I ask him, please move because I want him to be next to me. And he sit down, and after that he sit down. But the background he was from Rwanda, and I don't know how many people know about the slaughtering, the genocide of 800 people in Rwanda. And this guy, he was Tutsi, and the other one, he was Tutsi. So they was both in my class. So I have to facilitate and make sure they don't get in argument, and also they don't get offended as well to treat one of them over the other one. So there is some stuff you have to know, to have to understand when it comes to a different culture with different people, what's their history, what they are coming from, what's their background as well. And the lastly, when the Afghani guys, like the refugee Afghani, when they come last 3 years, you also to have to understand what they are coming from. So this is what when the U.S. evacuate within 24 hours, and those men within they have to leave their country. So I have this man in my class. I was eating dinner. We left everything in our dining table and we left. We didn't have anything with us. So to understand where they are coming, how they are frustrating, what they are going through, and to be in the class, not understanding why he need to be in the class is very important. So I'm going to pause here. If you can do the next slide, please.
Sorry, there is a question. Maybe you want to answer it from Lisa Nitch. Any suggestions for those of us with white privilege and or citizenship privilege who are working with immigrant men who say they are reluctant to engage or acknowledge abuse for fear of deportation or further prosecution? In some cases, I believe it's legitimate fear, and sometimes body language, tone makes me feel like the person just doesn't want to engage. Any suggestions for sensitive ways to explore what's going on with him, or whether we should push at all?
So we did have one client. He was like about to be deported, and so the key, I get that one. What's the point? I will be deported anyway. Sometimes it's true, sometimes not. sometimes it will affect their citizenship. They will not get their citizenship, or they will stay longer, so they have to get a lawyer and they have to apply for different status. So it's a long process. But the main thing I will tell them, it doesn't matter if you're deported, if you're staying here, if you're even divorced. You have to learn this skill. You have to learn when you are going back to your family, with your kids, with your partner, even if you're divorced and if you don't have children, eventually you will get married. So how to start a new life with a new person. So it's very important for us to address it. This is not the end of the day. This is not the end of the year. This is not like the end of the world. Eventually you will start a relationship, or you go back to your spouse, and you have to deal with it. So you have to get the skill and understanding with the healthy relationship. Crossing arm, I want you guys, if you don't mind, if you put it in the chat, and in your culture, or mainly in American culture, what it means crossing arm when you're sitting next to other person or you're talking to a person. Closed off conversation or topic set. Closed off. Yeah. Don't want to engage. Okay. Yes. And if we can go to the, okay, not open to noticing. Good. I think you covered most of it. And this is other people, they thought about it as well, how they will feel about it. Angry, confused, triggered. That's what most of the response we will get. But in different cultures, this is what it means. Respect and active listening. You have to understand what it means in different culture when it comes to that. You can go to the next slide. I think we have to rush on. So avoiding eye contact, what that mean in your culture? Comfortable, nervous, lying. Yeah, we get that a lot. Respect, careful, polite, shy. Yes, so if we can go to the next slide. So that's usually what we get most of the time. We can get to the next slide. And in some culture, it means respect. When you have to not to do eye contact, and especially when is it your teacher or someone older than. Can go to the next slide. So we're gonna shift the gear, and I think we will not have a lot of time, so I will rush out with this one a little bit. This is only one of the things I pull out from anti-racism, the policy or practice of opposing racism and promoting racial equality. Can we go to the next? I want to ask this question, and this is maybe you can put in the chat or something. Maybe I want you just to think about it. How invested you are in the refugee community in your area? So I want you just to think about it. And I see Asian culture, it is a sign of respect. Yes, and there is a lot of culture they do that. So I want you just to think about it, if you want to put in the chat, or I want you to hold this thought, how much you invest in the refugee community and what can be done. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, and this is when it comes to the xenophobia. When I ask about how much you invest, so investing is not just, I want to share one thing, and I had a neighbor, we're friends, and always like putting sign on their door, we're with the refugee and immigrant, and they always put like a sign in their yard, and they will post a lot of positive and supportive photo and statement regarding refugee and immigrant. But we're there for 10 years, we're neighbors, and in our culture, usually we give food, like when we do a food, we give it to our neighbor. So we had that habit until I think we stopped lately. So we take a food, like we make a dish and we'll take it to them and we'll knock their door for dinner and we give it to them and we will keep it. They will keep the dish and we will leave. So what happened, they will bring the dish back. And in our culture, it's so rude when you give something when they bring the dish back empty. So I understand they're American, they didn't maybe know about our culture, but it's not just that they bring the dish empty, they will leave it early in the morning in our front door and they will take us thank you for the delicious dish. So understanding the culture is not just enough to invest. Investing is to have a friend. And I just like I want to ask you, and I want you to think about it. How many friends do you have as a refugee and immigrant? How much do you having a conversation with them? How much like you're inviting them to their celebration, your New Year, to your Christmas, to your birthday party, to go to their house and have a conversation and see what they need and what kind of support they need. So when it comes to the racism, I always say we see, we feel, and we breathe it every day. So injustice giving people depression, and those men when they come to the class, they're depressed sometimes because of what they see in the street every day, like walking to the school, to the work, to the shopping, to the mall, to customer service, how they are frustrated just because they have accent, and how that affect them, and how that affect them when they come to the class, and how, as a facilitator, we have to listen to those feelings because that affect them, and we don't listen and we don't address it when it comes to the class. How that will be part of our their healing as well. One thing I learned is those community when they get rejected on when there is other people that are not investing in it, they will be a close community. So you can see and you can feel some community, they are very close. They're in a point, especially third generation, they're with their community. They don't interact, they don't invest as well in different cultures because they've been held back or they've been rejected from many people, sometimes willingly, sometimes unwillingly, sometimes they didn't, just like it is what it is. And not just like my neighbor, if it was bad, it just this is how they thought is to supporting refugee and immigrant. This is their method, like to support them. You're good, but that's how much I can support you. I don't have time to invest in your life because it is what I can provide, but this is how I can be supported. I think if we can go to the next slide. And why it's important, I think this is what we talk about, why it's important to talk about racism in the class. As we covered, I think it was one slide ahead, I was one slide ahead. And one thing also I want to mention before I pause is when you do a training, when you're inviting people to your table, make sure there is two things. We have third generation immigrant or refugee, and we have second. So for example, my kids, they will be second generation, so they're born here. They go to the school here, they learn the culture, they don't have accent. We are the third generation. My experience with the racism is different with my children. The way we see it, they see it differently. So I just want to put this one there. So for you guys to understand when it comes to the racism, generation to generation, group to group also is different. They're not all the same. I think I'm gonna pause here so we'll have time for question. I think next slide, I think, and my information, I think the next slide, if you guys need, I will share it as well.
Maybe you can write it in the chat. Yeah, be nice to see each other now. I don't think I didn't see any other questions, but please add, or if I miss something, please write it down. Sometimes the chat goes fast. Jack says this generational experience of racism comes up all the time in our dialogues. Yeah. Oh, there is a question. Can you speak more about the second generation, third generation experience with racism from Devin? I think that's for you, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The first generation is when we came here, like either because of the language barrier, you speak language or you don't speak language, you're fluent, you have accent, people understand you, so you feel it more. I can share it all day. As I told you, from the time we walk out of the door, we see it, we feel it, we breathe it from the time we come home. As close as I can tell, yesterday, for example, I was at the one of the shop, grocery shop. So the lady in front of me, so the cashier was African American. The person in front of me was white. So there was she greeting them. They was talking. They had a laugh, joke. Uh, Even like she mentioned, we have this coupon. You can use it. She passed and she left. And when it comes to mine, she's not just greeting me, not telling me there is a coupon, just like ignoring me. Even like I asked her, can I have the receipt? She handed me the receipt even to look at my face. So day to day, and this is me, I can speak, I know my, so imagine when there's people, they come, they're new here, they don't know anything about their rights. So how they will feel about it.
Mhm. Another question, do you feel like that potential bias exists with the same culture between generations? Does that, I guess it gets passed on even after people don't have an accent and so on? I imagine that's the question.
Yes, it does. And also, but it's different. Like I was talking to my daughter this yesterday morning. I say, I have a presentation. What kind of racism do you see in your class, in your, so that the experience they have is different. It's different from the first generation. They don't for example, because they don't have a language barrier or they don't have accent when they go to the store, they will deal with them differently. They will respect them, let's say, more, or they will pay attention more what they are saying. Even with the customer service, like my son, he's 19. When he called, the tone of the customer service, for example, is totally different. We go to the doctor appointment. We have a joking immigrant say when you want to go to the doctor, take a white person with you so they will know how to speak. So is those things it when it comes to you, when it comes day to day, how you have to deal with it and how that will affect your life today.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, and Felipe's a comment of with the election coming, there are more and more demonization of immigrants. One thing that people don't realize, so I'm an immigrant from Mexico. Actually, I come from a family of refugees before that, but I travel around with my passport because I was just in Kentucky last week and we were talking about it, because the driver's license doesn't prove that I'm a US citizen, especially from Massachusetts, where actually undocumented folks can get a driver's license. So I could get detained just because my accent, and this is what people don't realize, right? And I have my passport to show that I'm an American citizen, or people could carry a green card. So this environment that is being created that Felipe was talking about of fear, not only for undocumented immigrants, for all immigrants and refugees, is, I think, something to be taken into consideration. Just, we have talked in earlier sessions, and I know you folks talk about taking into consideration fear, trauma, and so on. Immigration is a traumatic process. That's the other thing that we need to understand. To immigrate into, even in the best of conditions, is a traumatic process, and it often could be really awful. People who, for instance, come from, we're hearing a lot about the border in the South, right? Most of those people, certainly, I would say almost all women that come from, and that they pass, and I feel really ashamed about this, my country of Mexico, because that's where usually they get sexually assaulted, almost universally. So I think you have to assume, as you may assume with other people, that there will be a trauma with immigration, whether it's documented, undocumented, and so on, something to take into consideration.
And I like that one, the journey before, after, and once you are here.
Yeah.
That's exactly because the journey started because you have to flee your country. you don't have choices sometimes, and sometimes you end up in some countries you are not even thought about it, and you end up there, and it will start from there.
And that's the other point, yes. I think I'm preaching to the choir here, but most people, most immigrants, or certainly refugees, would prefer to stay in their countries if that was a possibility, right? Yeah, there are the myths of the US and so on, but there are also the fear of the US, right? Where you, in other countries, you hear about gun violence and so on. So yeah, it's most people, even if they come here as immigrants and not refugees, if it were possible, if economic conditions were different, they would choose to stay in their countries. So there's always that conflict.
Yes, and I want to add one more thing, and I get this one sometimes as a plan. They say, "Why you don't go back? You don't like it?" And what is the dilemma? You come, you start the life, you're here, you have a children, they're going to school, they're staying there. So you're in a dilemma if you want to go back and start the life again after 20 years, or you're staying here. So it is not like you have a choice sometimes. Sometimes
Right.
you're in the heaven, let's say. Like I see people from Hawaii, I always want to be in Hawaii, and maybe they don't like to be in Hawaii. So it's you've been in a position you don't know what to do to go back. Even sometimes the countries change, they're safe, you can go, or sometimes you have to just stay.
Okay. There is a question, but I don't think we have time to answer it, at least. I'm so sorry. Maybe you can email Nyaz or myself about cultural considerations in person versus virtual. We only have a minute left and we don't want to take your break. Rebecca is putting the evaluation link there, and I'll pass it on to Rebecca. Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you, Nyaz. It's a pleasure to present with you.
Thank you.